Back here, first things first, welcoming Coach Mangini. Hey, Coach, thanks so much for joining us.
How you doing?
Good morning.
One day, Coach and I watch football together.
It didn't happen last night?
No, I'm on like an 0 for 11 streak of inviting Coach to watch football. But one day it'll happen.
I had a bunch of friends in from Australia last night, so there's a bunch of Australian rules football coaches and rugby coaches.
I would have loved to have them over.
Well, they had more insight than you had. I had to go international to...
So what you're saying is Nick takes away from your view?
No, he doesn't know that. He's never watched with.
All right, we're gonna.
Last night's game went a little late, though, to be fair.
All right, let's talk some football. Speaking of last night's game, they call it Monday Night Football. It takes place Monday night. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks taking on the undefeated Niners in the Bay. Picked this up in overtime. That's how close it was. Seattle in the red zone. Russ's pass picked off by linebacker Dre Greenlaw. One of the few mistakes Russ made. Greenlaw returns his first career INT, 47 yards to get San Francisco to midfield. After Jimmy G gets the Niners in field goal range, Chase McLaughlin in with a chance to be hero. He is not. That 47-yarder wide left. Both teams trade punts. Seattle's Jason Meyer says, let me get a crack at 42 yards. He does. It is good. Seattle wins, handing the 49ers their first loss of the season. What a game. Here's Russell Wilson after the win.
That was the craziest game I've ever been a part of. I mean, talking about a Monday Night Football game, it felt like NFC Championship game right there. Just back and forth, two great teams going after it.
It was a tough-fought game. It's a good team, and so we knew it was going to be a, tough fight and everything. But I thought our guys battled, up until the end. It was a tough loss.
Coach, how did the Seahawks win this one last night?
Well, there were a couple things that went into this. One thing I really like about Seattle is their willingness to continue running the ball and their commitment to the running game and things that helps them do. And they did that fairly effectively last night. They did a good job of stopping San Francisco from running the ball. But it came down to turnovers. And really in the second half, when you look at San Francisco's body of work, that first drive, they went out on downs. And then the next drive, it was the fumble that set up a touchdown. And the next drive, it was the interception that set up the touchdown. It was those turnovers that just created situations that was hard for them to dig out of. And they did a nice job, too, of forcing some turnovers, very uncharacteristic turnovers. But Seattle just did a better job of that at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when you have replacement-level players, sometimes you don't get the results you're looking for. San Francisco is a team that's built on your defense, and with your defense, you need a good special teams to be able to complement that. Last night, they really missed Robbie Gould. You saw what happened with Chase McLaughlin, the 47-yard field goal in overtime that he missed after making a 47-yard field goal in the fourth quarter to force overtime. So you have to count that as a huge loss and an opportunity or an advantage for the Seahawks. Also, no George Kittle, no Emmanuel Sanders. He went out in the second quarter with a rib injury, and then Matt Breida was nicked up. You didn't have the 1-2 punch in the backfield, Coach. To your point, Seattle Seahawks defense shut down that running game of the 49ers. That running game wasn't full strength. And so when it's not, you have to rely on Jimmy G to be able to throw you into a game. And when you have a deficit and you're playing from behind in the second half, he's not exactly the quarterback that you want to trust. And the Seattle Seahawks defense took advantage of all the miscues that the 49ers had. Now, Seattle had to overcome their own mistakes as well, because they had 4 turnovers in this game. The DK Metcalf turnover right before halftime, which was a huge play.
So 7 points.
Jaquiski Tartt makes a great play, stripping the ball out and being able to give them the ball at the 2-yard line. You had the Chris Carson fumble. Then you had the Russell Wilson, Jermaine Ifedi fumble. Then you had the overtime interception. And yet somehow, some way, the Seahawks are able to overcome all of that on the road in order to win a game. And that really comes down to, for me, 2 things. The way that the defense played for the Seahawks, and then Russell Wilson being great in critical situations.
And what's amazing about that is on that third down in overtime, you knew the one thing that could really kill you there is a Russell Wilson scramble. And the D-line didn't have the lane integrity, and he scrambles for 18 yards. It's the one thing in that moment that
kills you.
Cannot let happen.
And you know that is a huge part of his brilliance, is that this isn't a guy who surprised you with the scramble like Ryan Tannehill did the Chiefs a couple times. Like this was a guy who has made an enormous part of his career doing exactly that.
Yeah, that's what you have to stop. You've got to force him to be a passer and be a consistent passer. Not that he's ineffective there. He's very dangerous there. But when he combines the moving plays and then the actual scrambles, it just breaks your back.
Nick, when you look at this 49ers team, they had almost everything working except there was one big question mark, and that was at quarterback.
Yep.
And I don't know if, I mean, coming off a great game and then what happened last night, he's inconsistent. And I know you were not on his corner coming, and where are you coming out?
A lot of people have great games against the Arizona Cardinals secondary, and that game last week was inflating his numbers to a degree. I think going into last week, he had 9 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Then last week, he has a 4-touchdown game, no turnovers. And you're like, oh, okay, Jimmy G has maybe turned a corner. No, he hasn't. If the 49ers, now, to be fair, the loss of Emmanuel Sanders during the game was a killer, and not having George Kittle, who Kyle Shanahan says their best offensive player, and he's right, obviously is a killer. Kittle's one of the 2 best tight ends in football, he and Travis Kelce. He might be the best. But if you have to rely on Jimmy Garoppolo to win you football games right now, even though he has a 16-3 record for his career, you're going to be in trouble. And he looks skittish in the pocket. You mentioned the turnovers. He had 3. He could have had 7. He had 1 turnover, 1 interception that was taken away by penalty, a very questionable penalty. It looked like the receiver just falling down. And then in the final drive of regulation, he tried to throw the ball to Seattle multiple times. And in overtime, the only players he was hitting accurately were Seattle Seahawks. And the Seattle Seahawks, every one of those linebackers and secondary guys needs to be on the jugs machine this week, because they could have ended this game multiple times, which is why I was shocked that Kyle Shanahan was as aggressive as he was after Seattle punted the ball away. First, minute 50 left, no timeouts. Seattle punched the ball away. That shocked me, because what you're saying there is we're fine with a tie, but when you are down 2 games in your division, you're not really fine with a tie. But for San Francisco to get the ball there, and if they run the ball once, even if they go 3 and out, Seattle's going to have less than a minute. If they run the ball twice, the game's over. Like, they're going to go home with the tie. And I'm curious, you, from a coaching perspective, how much what I'm about to show you plays into the math here. San Francisco has to know what the record is, their standings going into the year. They have to know, obviously, that that New Orleans had lost. And we can show you what the records would have been had they taken a tie, which is the right-hand side. They're 2 games clear of the entire NFC. And with a loss, they are now jumbled with everyone. And they still have to play Green Bay, New Orleans, and Seattle again. As a coach, I know you play to win, but in that spot where if San Francisco wanted to, they could have taken a tie. Seattle could have done nothing about it. No timeouts. Were you surprised at all they were as aggressive as they'd been, with Jimmy G being as shaky as he'd been?
Yeah, I thought once they got the ball back, it was either going to be they won the game or it was a tie. I didn't think Seattle was going to get another chance at it. I didn't think there was any way Seattle was going to get another chance. I thought they'd at least run the ball 1 time, and even if Seattle got the ball back, it'd be such a small window that'd be really difficult for them to do what they did. And but everybody has a different philosophy, and oftentimes offensive-minded head coaches like to be aggressive, and they don't necessarily take into consideration the big picture. And then when you have a defense like they have, sometimes there's that thought process of we can be aggressive, because even if we punt it back, our defense is going to hold up and you know, put us in position to...
And by the way, all ties are not created equal. Like we were talking about before the show, if San Francisco were the team with 2 losses and Seattle were undefeated, then I would have supported San Francisco being aggressive, because you're trying to catch up in the standings. But when you are the only undefeated team in football, in this odd spot, a tie is damn near as good as a win, because Seattle still has 2 losses to make up on you, as is as is New Orleans and Green Bay. That's why it was so shocking to me, not just how Jimmy G was playing, but their positioning going into the football.
Well, sometimes when you're 8-0 and things are going your way the whole season long, you just assume it's going to go your way again.
Listen, no matter what, the NFC is going to be fun down the stretch at this point.
And one of those 2 teams is going to be a wild card.
I don't know how you can assume that, Coach. In overtime, you want to trust your quarterback over Russell Wilson?
All right.
Not the way to go.
Stick around, Coach. Coming up, are the Patriots as good as their 8-1 record?